They called it the Land of Opportunity, a new Eden, sprawling under the vast American sky. In the early 20th century, the Great Plains were not just fields, they were a promise of wealth, of a future built on endless fertile land. The government whispered encouragement, "The more you plant, the more you earn." And a nation listened. Lured by this golden dream, waves of farmers migrated west, their hearts full of hope. They came with their families and their ambition, armed with new technology. Tractors, roaring symbols of progress, tore through the ancient grasslands, replacing the steady pace of horses. Forests were cleared, and millions of acres of native prairie, which had held the soil together for millennia, were plowed under. All for one crop: wheat. The Great Plow-Up was celebrated as a triumph of man over nature. They were conquering the frontier, turning wild earth into profit. But in their rush to sow prosperity, they were unknowingly sowing the seeds of their own destruction. They called it the Land of Opportunity, until the land took its revenge. By 1931, the promise began to crack. The rains, once so reliable, simply stopped. The relentless sun baked the overworked fields, turning the rich topsoil into a fine, lifeless powder. Then, the wind came. It started as a whisper, a small cloud of dust on the horizon. But soon, that whisper became a roar. The winds swept across the plains of Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, and Colorado, lifting the very ground from under their feet and carrying it hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles away. The sky, once a brilliant blue, began to turn a sickly brown. And then came Black Sunday, April 14th, 1935. Eyewitnesses described it not as a storm, but as a moving mountain, a 2-mile-high wall of black, swirling dust, traveling at 60 miles per hour, descended upon the plains. It blotted out the sun, plunging midday into a terrifying midnight darkness. The air grew thick and heavy, a suffocating blanket of grit. People were blinded, choked. Livestock collapsed in the fields, their lungs filled with dirt. Families huddled in their homes, sealing doors and windows with wet rags, hiding under blankets, desperately trying to breathe through damp cloths. But the dust was relentless. It seeped through every crack, covering everything in a thick, gray film. The dust didn't just choke their lungs, it choked their dreams. For millions, the American dream had become an American nightmare. There was nothing left. The farms were buried, the crops were gone, and the banks were foreclosing. And so began one of the largest migrations in American history. Over 2.5 million people fled the Dust Bowl states. They were farmers, families, hard-working people who had lost everything. Derisively nicknamed Okies, they packed what little they owned onto rusted, sputtering trucks and set their sights west, toward the promised land of California. The highways became rivers of broken dreams. Their journey was a testament to human desperation. Their jalopies, piled high with mattresses, pots, pans, and children, crawled across the desert. Signs scrawled on the back read, "California or bust." But for many, California was not the paradise they imagined. They were met not with open arms, but with suspicion and hostility. They were America's refugees in their own country. Turned away at the border by police, they were forced into squalid labor camps, living in tents and shacks. They worked for starvation wages, picking fruit and cotton for landowners who exploited their desperation. The novelist John Steinbeck immortalized their plight in The Grapes of Wrath, capturing the raw pain of a people uprooted and discarded. They didn't run toward hope. They ran away from despair. But what about those who stayed? They were the ones who refused to surrender, who clung to their land with a stubborn, desperate faith. Their lives became a grim ritual of survival in a world turned to poison. Every morning began with the same task, sweeping and shoveling drifts of dust out of their homes, only for it to blow back in by evening. They watched their livestock starve and were forced to kill the animals they could no longer feed. Their diets shrank to canned beans and cornmeal, anything that could be stored away from the invasive grit. To keep the air in their homes even remotely breathable, mothers hung wet sheets over windows and doorways, a fragile barrier against the toxic clouds. At mealtimes, plates were kept face down on the table until the food was served, a small act of defiance to keep them clean. But the dust was inescapable. It was in their water, their food, their hair, their teeth. Doctors began reporting a new, deadly illness: dust pneumonia. It ravaged communities, silently stealing the breath from the young and the old. The very air had become an enemy. When the air itself became poison, survival became a prayer. For nearly a decade, the dust reigned. But slowly, miraculously, the land began to show mercy. The rains returned in the late 1930s, not with a sudden downpour, but as a gentle, life-giving drizzle. As the earth drank, the nation finally learned its lesson. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration launched one of the most ambitious environmental recovery projects in history. The Soil Conservation Service was created, teaching farmers new techniques to protect the land that fed them. Farmers learned about crop rotation, contour plowing, and planting shelter belts, long rows of trees to break the wind's devastating force. The Civilian Conservation Corps employed thousands of young men to replant the prairies with native grasses, whose deep roots could once again anchor the fragile soil. Slowly, painstakingly, the green returned. The Dust Bowl era came to an end, but the scars remained, etched into the landscape and into the collective soul of a generation. It took a nation's near starvation to learn that the earth is not ours to own, only to respect. The story of the Dust Bowl is more than a chapter in a history book. It's a warning. It's a chilling reminder of what happens when human ambition outpaces wisdom, when short-term profit is pursued at the cost of long-term survival. It happened once, when a relentless pursuit of more turned fertile plains into a desert, when the sky itself turned black with the consequences of our actions. Today, we hear new warnings carried on the wind about changing climates, rising temperatures, and extreme weather. The Dust Bowl teaches us that the Earth has a breaking point. It reminds us that our relationship with nature is not one of conquest, but of balance. If we ignore the lessons written in the dust of the past, we are doomed to repeat them. History has a way of coming back around, and the wind remembers. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as powerful as I do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. See you next time.